Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our weekly web series, our weekly live stream. My name is Craig Colangelo. I'm a senior solutions architect with PM Square. I'm just recovering from COVID, so I've been banished to the basement. So forgive the rough presentation and probably voice as well. Today, we wanted to focus on something interesting to me as a person who has two kids in school still. Actually, one just graduated, but the other one is on her way to graduating as well. Um, Seeing how Gen AI in higher ed, plays out, and what our friends at IBM are seeing in that space is really, really interesting to me. So today we're just going to have a casual conversation. Joining me today is Margo Keeler. Margo, say hi to everybody, would you?
Hi, everybody. So, Craig, I hope you're getting better because that's not any fun. Understand being banished to the basement for that. So, um, I do apologize if you guys hear a little noise in the background. I live in Florida, having some repairs made. We've had a few things come through recently, so apologize for that. But no, I'm excited about this conversation. As Craig mentioned, I work for IBM. I'm our Watson X or generative AI leader for our public market, which encompasses all of higher education for us, and I cover all of the U.S. So I see a kind of interesting swath of what's going on at a lot of different where universities are or where K through 12 organizations are in kind of in their AI journeys. So
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Margo. I really appreciate you joining us. Excited for the conversation as well. So you mentioned K through 12, so it's not just like post-secondary stuff. It sounds like you do the whole spectrum, huh?
we do the whole spectrum. I'll say probably most of our work ends up being done in higher ed, or I'll say that's who's further along right now in their generative AI journey. When we're looking at K through 12, we're doing a lot of work around teacher education, using a lot of generative AI assistance for new teachers coming on, trying to understand what all the policies are, particularly right now with a focus on students that are special needs. When you have teachers come on, there are a lot of new policies, a lot of situations may come up once a year. If you have special needs students and you get tornado evacuation, how do you handle that? What do you do? And you need an answer like right now. So having an assistant that's on your phone or right on your laptop you can get to, and you have guidance on how to handle something, is where they're really focused.
Margo, that is so cool. Okay, so when I think of like generative I mean, I'm still in the mode of thinking of it as like MVPs and proofs of concept and kind of like I don't know, low cost, like dip your toe in the water sort of stuff. But you're talking about like very critical things. So you're talking about fast response times in critical situations, and Gen AI is doing fitting the bill there, huh?
It is. I mean, we are seeing clients deploy it in ways that certainly our assistants are where a lot of people are focused, because it's what a lot of people see or had experience with before generative AI. They may have had I think we all interact with like 15 chat bots on a regular basis that may or may not be helpful if you don't phrase your question just right and that's not the answer I want. I got to rephrase it. The goal is to take the work that was done there, kind of add generative AI to it, and you don't have to redo the entire thing from start to finish. And it's just an interface people are very used to working with. But like we're rolling that out to a Big Ten university. It's got 80,000 students, and we're going to roll out a student assistant. We are rolling out a student assistant to all 80,000 of their undergrads because, when you look at someone who's 17, 18, 19, this is the thing they're most comfortable interacting with. And if they're having a hard time or they need assistance, they're more comfortable asking a question on their phone than they are going to find a person and ask a question. And so we're really focused immediately on like at-risk students that are at risk of dropping out because they can't find the resources. They may be first generation college students. They may be, like, where do I find a food bank? And they have multiple campuses, so you can identify what campus you're on and like, here's the food bank. Or, how do I get an internship? Like, I'm a communications major. How do I do that? There's so much information on all these campuses, but finding it is the problem. And we want to make it as easy as possible for students, because if we deliver that information in an easy way, it's easy to consume. You feel more connected to the campus. You're more likely to stay.
Oh, I totally get that. A student assistant makes perfect sense. Having guided, two of my kids through, the process of being a freshman and living on campus and all that is, I can understand how a student assistant right there, on your phone would be just such a valuable thing. I hope they've played on the idea of like an evolved resident advisor, and taking all the interesting quirks that are usually RAs and turning it into this student assistant. So I definitely want to go back to that use case. That sounds very, very interesting, especially if we're talking like a Big Ten university here. But let's talk real quickly about kind of like higher ed in general. So I'm thinking back to some work that I did for my company, for PM Square, trying to figure out exactly, what we do some work at the beginning of the year, figuring out which markets, which verticals are kind of hot and not, sort of a thing at the beginning of the year. And, for higher ed, a lot of the industry analysts kind of predicted that it was going to be very much a steady state sort of a experience where like expense moderation is going to be necessary. And I think they attributed that mostly to like cooling enrollment and declining revenue growth and things like that. What are you seeing from like the universities, big and small, in terms of like their appetite? I mean, it sounds like you've got a lot of interesting use cases here. What is their appetite for AI in general?
I think the appetite is large. There, we know we need to get it going. We know we need to give our students access to it, our faculty, our administrators, everybody needs access to it because we know it's a game-changing technology. Over here is how do you do that? And how do you do that in a way that reflects all the values of the university? And that's where the challenge is, because you could throw it out there and give everyone access to it, but then it creates generative AI as a force multiplier.
Hmm.
It can be a force multiplier for good. Conversely, it can be a force multiplier for bad if it's not channeled in the right way. So it's that second element is where everyone's kind of taking their time and trying to figure out how do they do this in a way that reflects their university, and making sure it aligns with their ethics. And some universities are saying, hey, we're going to focus on use cases that are purely like internal, and internal to them is faculty, um, or administrators, or something where it's not student facing. Students are really their consumers, and they're not putting it on like their public facing web page that anybody can get access to. So the first test case often seem to be like internal facing. And a lot of the push for generative AI is exactly what you said, Craig. We're seeing enrollments are shrinking. The pool of university age students is beginning to shrink. And so there is a tightening of the fiscal strings, if you will, around like how much budget we have to spend. But at the same point, where we're seeing generative AI grow is because it means that your staff of 15 can deliver a much better experience, and you can retain students, or you can deliver maybe you've lost a number of people, they've left the university and you're having trouble hiring skilled backfills. You can do the same thing with a team of 10 that used to take you 15 people. And so there's a cost savings there, is that the software doesn't cost as much as the people they may have lost, and they can add additional skills in with the AI.
Makes perfect sense. I mean, force multiplier is a fantastic way to put it, and there certainly is. I mean, we're seeing it as well. Kind of that missed opportunity cost, right? We're past the early adopter phase here, and those that aren't on board are going to be missing out. I mean, on the opportunities that those efficiencies will avail. So I get it. That makes perfect sense. Thanks for sharing that. That makes sense that it kind of starts internal. I mean, even for like we do these ideation sessions with our clients and allow them to dream what's possible in the world of AI, Gen AI, and other, and try to apply the right MVPs to kind of really let them
Mm-hmm.
start dipping their toes in the water. And that's exactly what we find outside of higher ed. We find that companies are starting with those small bits and mostly internal facing, where the risk is lower, and then as they get more comfortable and as the workloads kind of prove themselves and the return on investment kind of makes itself apparent, that we see expanded use cases. So I totally get that. And it makes perfect sense to me that universities are kind of approaching it that way. Um, so let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the student assistant. for a Big Ten university. And I understand you can't, tell us who exactly it is, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're seeing around those sorts of student assistants. And if you have anything to show us, that'd be really cool too.
Sure. Yeah, I will certainly talk about kind of the student assistance, and we're seeing it. We're doing it in universities that are 80,000 students to like 3,000 students. So it's not
Okay.
something that is just for the major universities. It also scales down to the smaller universities, and sometimes it feels like even has a bigger impact at the smaller universities, where it kind of helps you provide more of that hands-on touch that makes those universities special. Is you're getting that personalized experience where you may not be feeling that at some of the major state universities where it's a larger population.
Mhm.
Certainly have something to show you all, and it's about kind of a little bit of a different use case that I'll share and show with you all. Is we've done some work on admissions. So admissions is another area when you're talking about, a shrinking pool of applicants for higher ed, is how do you make sure you admit the right students for your school? Because admitting the right students that are a good fit for your school mean they stay. And if you're not losing students and you make sure they're paying their deposits, they're showing up, they're enrolling, and they're there all 4 years, that's huge, particularly because that's guaranteed tuition dollars for all 4 years. So one of the use cases we did was around admissions and using generative AI for admissions. Let me share. I'm going to first share with you all what our end product ended up looking like, and then I'm going to take you into the platform. So it'll be kind of sharing two different things, and I will speak to each of them.
Fantastic. Yeah,
So
thanks.
yep, I'm just going to make that a lot bigger because it's tiny. I apologize for it being so tiny. Um, So we took, in this case, we actually worked with a medical school. So, and we took a 70-page, if you've never applied to medical school, I personally hadn't, so I had to learn this. A medical school application is 70 pages long. It's a huge application. It's got multiple test scores, it's got research information, it's got what you've done for shadowing, volunteer hours, employment. You also have to make a number of statements. The summary of your overall application, your impact statement, and your research experience. You have to document all of that in 3 different essays. It's a hugely long application. It's as much work for the candidate as it is for the admissions team, who now needs to go comb through all of these applications. This particular university deals with about 25,000 applications annually. And reading through each one of those manually was taking just hundreds of hours per candidate. And then, one of the other aspects of this is they want to make sure all of their candidates are evaluated in the same fashion.
Hmm.
But their challenge was like you have an admission staff, and one person may read one essay and one person may read another essay. And, I would love to say humans don't have any bias, but I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure that if I read an essay at 9 in the morning and I'm cheery and having a great day versus it's like 4 o'clock, I've missed my coffee, I've had a bad day, your take on that essay could be very different. And it's not anything intentional, but
Totally.
some of that bias creeps in, just
It's
kind of the
human
day you're
nature.
having.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's human nature. Okay, so I didn't, yeah, I didn't really think about this use case entirely until you started talking about it, Margot. This makes perfect sense. So this is really where like AI ethics really kind of come into play
Yes.
here, right? You really need to have, you want a diverse, but you want a balanced and fair sort of admissions process for such critical roles as med school. You would think, not to mention all the other factors that you just talked about. You talked about retention and impact and financial security and all these other things that play into what makes a good candidate. So I can totally see how this is not just for summarization and classification, but really where you need a really strong sort of AI ethics approach to this as well. So I get exactly what you're saying. This seems really, really intriguing.
And there is a huge ethics component behind this. So I'm going to highlight 2 more things and then I will talk about the ethics component because that is a big piece that I want to make sure we get to, which is, when the AI looks at all these applications, right up top here, you can see positive attributes and flags. So first of all, I want to tell you the AI does none of the actual admissions work. We purely summarize all of this information into a format that was set by the school, that this is how they wanted to see it. And I'll show you this. They looked at other formats as well. And they just said, based on what we're seeing, we really like this format. So
Really? That's
you can
interesting.
take
So they took away the scoring component of it, and they really just had you, highlight the attributes. That's interesting.
exactly. So there's, while you see this as one output, it's just to kind of give an idea of what you could do with this. You could put it in any different format. So while we're highlighting flags or concerns in an application, we're nowhere rejecting any of the candidates. And then we highlighted positive attributes that the university wanted us to call out. And then what they're going to do with this over time is track the attributes of the candidates they admit over time to the graduation rates, to the success rates of those graduates, to then help them reverse engineer, here's the criteria that makes the most successful student at our
Oh,
university.
oh, they do that in marketing all the time, reverse engineering the persona. That makes perfect sense. I love that.
Exactly. And that goes back to the you need to retain students, and you want to find students that are going to be successful versus students having to have drop out, fail out, leave for other reasons it just wasn't a good fit, and then you're scrambling to try to backfill students. So if they get it right out the gate, it's a lot less expensive for the university as a result.
Makes
So
perfect sense. Yep.
you talked about ethics, and I am going to stop sharing this and I'm going to move over to the other thing. And in the meantime, while I do that, I'm going to talk about ethics. Um, so the ethical component of this is done with IBM's .governance. Um, IBM's governance platform is a huge bedrock principle for IBM. So IBM's three ethical foundation principles that we guide all of our AI on. One of them is that data belongs to their creator. So that means like your data, when it interacts with an IBM model, our model doesn't retain any of that data. So they interact, and then it gives you an output. That output belongs to you as the creator, and your data doesn't go into improving our model at all. So it's not like we take your university data and then we go help your arch rival university with this data that we've garnered from you. In no way do we use that data. So that's a huge principle for us. One of the other ones is trust and transparency. So our entire AI platform is built around trust and transparency. And our models have white papers issued on them. So we are completely transparent in all the data and information that they're trained on. And that let this university have the confidence that they knew everything that our models were trained on. So like we also filter out HAP, which is hate, abuse, and profanity. We pull all of that out of our models. And then with the additional governance framework on this, they can see and make sure the model isn't drifting in any way. They get automatic alerts if it begins to move. They can monitor it in real time. You know, they don't really have someone sitting there monitoring it. In all honesty, they have a day job, have something else to go do. So the platform watches it for them and says, it's operating fine. We'll track it over time. And then we have very tight parameters on this one. And if it were to vary, they instantly get an alert and they can go say, hey, something's off. We got to go fix this. And that gave them the confidence.
That's
So,
fantastic. So I mean, we've seen that in ML ops for years now, right? And models drift. That's what they do, right? So it makes
mhm.
perfect sense that you've got this mechanism that alerts only when action is required and doesn't require constant monitoring or a team of data scientists to pull it back within spec. That's fantastic. And you said this is using .gov, WatsonX.gov.
It's using watsonx.gov and it's using watsonx.ai. So they're using one of our IBM Granite models.
Hmm.
And that went back to we're completely transparent on all the data it's trained on. And that gave them the confidence to use the model in this situation. And then they're using the .governance platform on top of that. And they've actually chosen to run this on-prem because they want to make sure their data remains on their campus. So that was a key concern for them as well. We can run our generative AI platform in any cloud, but also we can run it on-prem as well.
Fantastic. So you're running like a big old granite model. I don't. How many parameters are we talking about here?
Just 8 billion.
That's all.
So it's actually, I
Nice.
mean, when you consider some of the new llama models we're talking about are 405 billion, GPT is geometrically bigger than that. For them, it was they got the model performance they wanted, and it comes at a cost point as well. As you're like, if you've seen all the new llama models that have come out, IBM just launched their third version of Granite 2 weeks ago, I think. Sorry, I began to lose track. 2-ish weeks ago. Um, the models are getting smaller, and the reason for that is you can get just as good results with smaller models, and they cost a fraction of what these bigger models cost, both from just a cost perspective, but from a compute requirement perspective, and then you also have the sustainability perspective. When you're looking at, like, I really hate to throw shade on ChatGPT, but it's like the biggest thing out there.
Mhm.
Is there was a sustainability conference, and they were talking about how every time ChatGPT answers a question, it consumes a 500 milliliter bottle of water.
Oh, that's so
So,
interesting that they
you
equated
know,
it like that. You have to, though. I mean, ChatGPT is now in the zeitgeist, right? It is the de facto, even, my parents know about it, So yeah, I fully understand how you have to kind of make those comparisons. Interesting. Okay.
exactly. So that's the next phase of, like, AI, is people are now saying, great, I want to use it, but I need to get a return on my investment. Like, these are the results I need, and I really don't care what model I'm using, as long as I'm getting the results. Um, I will say, I think one of the areas higher ed is challenged on is the speed at which generative AI is evolving.
Hmm.
If you're used to, like, a traditional IT evolution, that's not this, because the models that came out 6 months ago are now outdated and being decommissioned, and you have brand new models. So as you look towards how you build out your AI framework, how you build out your AI governance, it has to be flexible,
Hmm.
because you can't say, hey, we're going to allow you to use Llama version 2.0. It's being deprecated. Why? Because it's like a year old, and it's
Hmm.
time for it to go. So you more need to govern the use cases, and then you can change the models that are being used under the covers as they continue to evolve.
So, Margo, even for your on-prem customers, you're finding that they're able to keep up with this rapid, innovation streams that we see from all these model developers. Like, they're still able to keep up with that, even though the model lives like literally on-prem.
Yeah, they'll update the models on-prem to be access to the newer models. For them, they run it as, it's really how many GPUs they have on-prem.
Hmm.
They may be running some of the smaller CPU only models, but they'll say, hey, we're gonna run 3 small models, and so you can change out what one of those models is for a new model, as long as you have the same kind of throughput from
Hmm.
a from that perspective. Then their existing footprint on .ai can handle that. If you say, hey, actually, we want to transition and go over to these, let's say you want to use Mistral Large 2 on-prem with us, that's a much bigger model. It rivals GPT in performance. It's amazing, but it's a much bigger model. You need to have room to operate that in your system. And you may say, well, we're moving from 2 small models to 1 large model. We may need to add a couple more GPUs to our footprint to accommodate what we want to change to.
Gotcha. And do you typically see like Red Hat OpenShift clusters supporting these things? Is that what they're choosing for their GPU sort of architecture?
A lot of them are. Right now, we're also running it. Some of them are running on our storage solution that allow them kind of an easy setup as well. And then some of them want to bring it and put it on their very own hardware, and they're acquiring the GPUs often directly from NVIDIA or a third party that's buying them from NVIDIA.
Helping my NVIDIA stock, so I'm all about it. All right, looks like you got a little more here to show us. We
Exactly.
got about 5 more minutes. If you could,
Okay.
yeah, if you could show us a little bit about the
Sure.
AI and .gov, that'd be great.
Yeah. So this is the .gov. Sorry, no, this is the .ai platform. So we're kind of in my home screen, and I'm going to jump into the prompt lab here. And the prompt lab is where you would build an experiment, and you could do this in kind of like this chat feature, which everyone should be familiar with, because this is very much like how you would go interact with, like, GPT online. I'm
Hmm.
going to use our structured format here for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a prompt that says, you are an AI agent, and you're helping me as an admissions counselor summarize essays. So, and then I'm going to do this with no help for the AI. So I'm going to load an essay. We could load this in. I'm just cutting and pasting it for simplicity reasons. Up here is where you can choose your model. I have our AI guardrails turned on, which means this will filter out all hate, abuse, and profanity and make sure that doesn't come into the response. And then I'm using our new Granite 3 8 billion parameter model. But here you can choose from all the foundation models that are available in AI. You can also choose from ones in Hugging Face, and you can bring your own. But for the moment, I'm just going with Granite 3 8 billion. Select the model, and I'm going to generate. And so based on the prompt I gave this, you can see on the left-hand side is the essay. And then on the right-hand side is its summarization of the essay. So it's done the reading, it's found an output, and I think it's a pretty good output. But say you wanted to try something else. Let's try Llama's new 370 billion parameter model. I just click generate again. And now you can see what Llama's model would do with this. So this is a great place to try this out. You
Fantastic.
can see Llama's model's taken a completely different approach. It's still very much the same answer, but presented very differently. And I'll show one more for context. We'll go to Mistral.
So what you're showing here, Margo, is kind of like a prompt engineer or like an AI model developer kind of tuning the model and making sure that you've got the right sort of input and output sort of scenarios. Yes.
Exactly, yes. And this allows you in one place to experiment with multiple different models. Like I haven't locked in on a model I'm using for this. I'm just toggling between all of them to try them out. This could also be like, there could be a set list of models you all have access to because you've decided this is what we're going to put on prem. So then we wouldn't be showing models you don't have access to.
Mm-hmm.
But, so let's say I want to give this some guidance. We're going to take Alex's essay, we're going to put it up here. And then we've seen some of these respond with numbers. We've seen some of these not respond with numbers. Let's say you purely want to have a paragraph response. You say that's the format I want. So if we provide a singular essay example and a singular example output and just have made it pretty short, brief, that this is what we want. So then if I come back down here and say, hey, can you test it again? Let's see if it learns. Nope. Mistral still comes back that way. But let's go to Llama, because Llama generated it with numbers. So it got rid of the numbers, but it's still listing it more as a list. Okay. Maybe I want to change the prompt because I have it highlight key attributes instead of just summarize.
Mm-hmm.
So if I get rid of that, now you've got something that matches your example that you're looking for.
Man, what a fantastic development environment. That's great.
And it's really easy to use. And I say that not just as an IBMer, but I did not have a deeply technical background in any way. So this is very intuitive to learn. And the great part about that is we have a lot of universities using this and their business folks are able to use this. Again,
That's
because
great.
it's very intuitive. Like model parameters, I wouldn't suggest most people mess with model parameters. What I would say is in here, like we've set the maximum number of tokens, and that's purely the length of the response that we allow. The shorter the response, the fewer the tokens. And again, that goes into kind of a cost element as well.
Sure.
If you allow the AI to be really verbose, it can be more expensive than maybe making it more succinct. But again, that's a case by case basis. So that's kind of a real brief walkthrough of how you would do summarization with generative AI.
Yeah, and again, you've got business people using this, easy to use sort of WYSIWYG, development environment in order to be able to not just, deploy models, but tune them and choose which large language model you want to solve your generative AI problems for you. That's fantastic. I can see how that would be just super easy and super usable. Margo, we got like a minute left. Do you have anything that you wanted to, anything more you wanted to tell or show?
No, I think we've pretty much talked about all of it. I will say you all have seen there's so many models in here to use. One of IBM's big things is being open, and I actually think that's a big thing when it comes to education because we want AI to be controlled by the many, not the few. And
Mhm.
open models can then IBM is about to launch something on December 15th called Instruct Lab on .ai, which will allow people to fundamentally change the underlying model. And so that will be granted as a right. And where that could come in handy is when it comes to research, particularly like university research, and you want to give your AI a PhD in chemistry or a PhD in biology because you want it to be like a joint researcher with you.
Mhm.
That's where Instruct Lab could begin to come in really handy.
Mhm.
Or maybe you just want to create a model that's specific to your university. You could choose to do that as well.
Interesting. And I would imagine that has something to do with the Hugging Face association that IBM made recently.
Yes, it's already live on Hugging Face, but we're going to bring it to our platform as well.
Fantastic. Margo, I love it. What interesting work you do. Thanks a bunch for sharing with us. We've got a few more weekly webinars coming up before the year's out. Literally one every Wednesday. Next up, we're going to be talking about Amazon Q and Code Assistant. Then I think we're going to get into IBM Manta, which is a great lineage tool. Kind of shows you end to end, the transformations and sources that your data comes from. Of course, we'll be at reInvent in December. So if you want to meet up with us there, please reach out. We'll certainly be happy to say hi. And as always, you can keep up with our events at pmsquare.com/events. Margo, thanks again. I really appreciate your time today. It was a very interesting conversation, and what fantastic work you do.
Appreciate you having me on, Craig, and I hope the recovery continues.
Slow but steady. Thanks, Margo. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.